So Phil, I know we spoke just now. Is there anything you wanted to raise, or can we move on?
Well, I just wanted to follow up on the last part of our discussion where we talked about there were certain groups where folks mentioned that their boards were required by law to be made up mostly of workers. So that then finding board members with wealth, wisdom, with the resources, the money, and the networks are where they had um, kind of a need. They had a gap to fill. And how some of the groups were talking about forming advisory boards. And so had some specific ideas about how to find people for those advisory boards, and some groups of them can come from possible vendors to the organization, like banks. You have a banking relationship with a bank, so maybe there's an executive or someone there that has dealt with you and could be approached to be on such an advisory committee. And then that could broaden you up to different kinds of board members and different kinds of opportunities. Similarly, organizations, since they're immigrant organizations, there are many industries and businesses and companies that rely on immigrant labor, or they get a significant amount of business from immigrant consumers. On either side of that, like stores, merchants that people go to, or places where they work, are both potential places where you can find people in those organizations that are sympathetic to the cause of immigrants, that see it maybe even in self-interest, that they keep a strong immigrant community and policies. And so those kind of people can be found in some of those ancillary kind of industries to yourself.
Okay.
So those are just a couple ideas about where people can look for that advisory committee kind of thing.
So hope that's helpful. Does anybody have a question or comment? If not, we can move on. Okay, so now we're talking about the big picture for fundraising. Remember, we put up that graphic where we were showing the different funding streams that come into an organization and how it should be broken up, right? How you should diversify your funding streams. Well, and we talked about that area of that where you can plug in your board members. So things like individual giving, okay, donations. Your board can connect to individual donors, bequests, personal giving, their own giving, that usually there is some kind of a requirement built in anyway when they come onto a board. They can also help with grant writing. And I was so pleased, I can't tell you enough, how pleased I was to hear that some of you have board members that are integral and connected to the grant writing and fund seeking of the organization. That's like music to my ears, to hear that board members are connected in that way. A lot of times you don't see that. It's very rare. It happens, but it's very rare. So to hear that, it's wonderful. They can connect you to key foundation leadership, public leaders, advisory board, and key corporate leaders, okay? Also, they help you with the special events. I would say put them in front of the special events. That's something that you can really utilize them in that area the most, okay? And it's the most flexible for them. It's fluid. There's many areas that they can decide that they're going to help with the fundraising aspect of things. Okay, so they help coordinate the special event, and they lead the fundraising process through a fundraising committee. Utilize that fundraising committee. And if you don't have one, you need to put one in place. Just like you have the finance committee, you need the fundraising committee. Those two, okay? And again, we talked about that breakdown: 10% government, 20% individual giving, 13% foundations, 2% bequests, 10% corporations, 5% other, Just remember that. It's a good formula. And so now we're talking about the grant writing steps and board participation. Yay! We won't beleaguer that so much because we do have organizations here that do that well. But I would be interested to know how your board members are connecting to your grant writing process, okay? Now, remember I talked about alignment, and it's the board's responsibility to help make sure that the organization is meeting its mission and is aligned with funders. This is one of those things where you and board members, that whole social bingo thing that we were talking about, can come together, review funders' websites to see, are there people that we know in these specific aligned foundations or potential funders? Who do they know? So that's the first thing you do, okay? With or without a board member, but you definitely want to do this with board members because that's going to push, it's going to help push that proposal through or that conversation about a special project. We haven't talked about those, but maybe a little bit further down the line, but you're going to utilize your board members in that area, okay? And then you're going to, once you've reviewed a website and it's aligned, you want to introduce yourself. Never send a cold proposal. Those days are over. Over. You must contact the funder if you are planning to send them something. And especially if it's a funder that is not taking unsolicited proposals. You may be aligned, but they'll come to you. So in that regard, that's where you do that introductory email where you said, that case statement, that case package. That's what you're sending to them at that point to see if they even want to pick up the phone and say, okay, let's have a meeting. Okay. But you can also utilize your board members to call a funder directly if they know that funder, if they know that program officer, if they know the CEO of Chicago Community Trust or the Woods Fund or the Weebolt Foundation or Crossroads. Some of those organizations I know you guys are very familiar with. Okay.
Can I just
absolutely
I have to interject there?
Mm-hmm.
That is so key. I what you're hitting on there is so key, Alma, because there were so many instances when I worked in foundations where, because a board member of a prospective organization was the person that called and had a connection with a board member, they got the VIP treatment in terms of at least getting the full airing and the ultimate consideration, even if they didn't get a grant, and most of the times they did. Even if they didn't, they got guidance to lead them to eventual funding. So I can't be stressed enough that if they have possible connection inside an organization, that should be used and exploited.
Absolutely, to the fullest, inside and out, upside and down. I promise you.
This is a relationship business.
It absolutely. Don't be shy about putting those relationships forward. That's what's going to get you in the door. When he says a full airing, that's what you want. That's what people are literally competing for, is to at least get in the door for somebody to hear the story. Okay, so you definitely want that. And then to send white papers, a brief overview of your organization. Again, you're doing that for funders and would-be donors that are not taking unsolicited information, proposals, or even a letter of intent. They don't want that yet. You're not even ready for that because some of them don't take unsolicited LOIs. Okay, so you want to have a white paper, a brief overview, something that you can give. And then, of course, the next thing is the letter of intent. Okay, we can talk more about that later, but these are the grant writing steps before you even get to a full proposal. This is like the getting to know you portion. Okay, it's on you, Phil.
All right, foundations. What are foundations? They're essentially pools of money, pots of money that are tax advantaged, meaning they lower the tax liability of the donor. And though because of that, that money has to be used for charitable purposes. Foundations really exist to do what's ameliorate or lessen the negative effects of a capitalist system. In a capitalist system, there are created what are called externalities by economists. That's all the bad stuff: pollution, crime, bad conditions. Foundations were created and grew and thrived to address those kinds of things in the society that from a private standpoint. And in a way, they became the research and development for what would become many social programs were really birthed in foundation efforts. Now, to keep these tax advantages, which if you can imagine, give foundations a lot of influence in public policy. It comes from having this tax advantage pool of money. They're required to give at least a 5% away of that corpus, whatever that body of money is that they sit on. They have to give at least 5% away on a rolling average, meaning it doesn't have to be 5% every year, but on a rolling average, it's 5%. That's important because there's sometimes a stock market, and most of this is based on the stock market. Stock market returns are low. That would tend to make them give away less money, but they have to stick to that percentage to keep giving even when it's low. That also benefits when the stock market is high because then there's more money to give away. And in times like that, you see foundations coming up with new programs and lowering the bar, in a sense, on giving away money because they have to give away money. And this is where that earlier point that Amma made about these connections comes into play, because there are times when foundations find themselves wanting to find people doing the things you do because they have extra money. And the important thing to know about foundations is they are like snowflakes and they're not a monolith. We think of them as foundations, but they're family foundations, they're corporate foundations, they're small and large foundations. And that's why doing that prospect research that we talked about in our earlier discussions through things like Forefront, where you can find out everything about how much that foundation has, everything they do, it gives you a better sense of how to approach them and how approachable they are. Because they vary in how big they are, how they're structured. A family foundation works a lot differently than a corporate foundation, than a community foundation like Chicago Community Trust. And their mission and guidelines are going to be very different. So you want to suit your message to that right audience. And so knowing that their foundations are not all the same is very key. Next slide, please. So another thing to understand about your organization, and especially the organizations in this chat, you're all very, very important. You do work and you bring things to the table for our society that are so key because they're not there. And so you're filling a void with your work. And so that organization's mission is why you would be getting money from any source. But if you understand that in this ecosystem of nonprofits and funders and all of that, what you all do, what your organizations do, is needed and necessary to the funders. Remember, they have to give away that 5%. So they got to give it away to somebody. They don't need to necessarily give it to you, but that's the job you have in convincing and selling them. But the point is, if you're aligned with their mission and you really do the things that you say, and they are aligned with the mission of the foundation, you are now an asset. And once the foundation understands you and sees you as an asset, your relationship changes with them. And it's not so much a gatekeeper of the money. You can't get the money. It's how do we make this work and make this relationship give the result we both want. So just remember, uh, the organization, the board in this uh, uh, understanding of how to get the money, its organization's reputation, its quality, its ability to do the fund, its job when you have your reports, when you're clear communication, all of that is an asset to the program staff within the foundation. It makes their job easier. And the easier that you make the job of the people inside the funding organization, it greases the wheel and again makes it easier for you to get that money. Next slide. So we've talked about board members, particularly being the brand ambassador for the nonprofit. So if they're going to go out there and be this brand ambassador, and this really kind of can apply to anyone involved in the fundraising process that we talked about before. That could be anybody who's going to speak and be an interface with the public on this organization that could impact funding. There needs to be language that people can easily use and remember, and that is consistent among all of them, that reflects the reasons why a person would want to give and should give. And we call this an elevator pitch. And we're going to drop some specific links about how to construct this elevator pitch. But the idea is that if you were stuck in a elevator with the person that could give your organization the money it needed to do its work, what would you say to them in that 30 seconds you might have, or that minute or half minute you have as the elevator is moving? And the way you get that is from that case statement. It's the distillation of all the messages, maybe something that happened that's a big victory for the organization, or things that are about it that make it uniquely important. Are there testimonials? Are there stories that you could tell about the impact of your organization to this person that would spark that next conversation so that you can go forward in those processes that we talked about earlier? Are there some scandal? Is there something that either related to the larger issue you're in or the particular organization that you have to respond to, that you have language for? I remember when 9/11 happened, and there were many immigrant organizations working with the Arabic population that were getting a backlash, or they were getting questions from people about, okay, da, da, da. They had to have language that separated and dealt with that crisis that they didn't create, but now it was affecting them. So the board members have to have that language, and the staff has to develop that in conjunction with them so that they know it is part of their understanding of the organization and they can deliver that. So the elevator pitch is something that is critical. And
So now what we're going to do, you guys are going to be able to create your own elevator pitch, okay? We want each participant to say what they believe the org's pitch is. And we want the other listeners in the group, is the pitch concise, clear, and compelling? Why? There are certain components to an elevator pitch. It's just that you don't come in there and just start talking and talk and talk. You've only got a certain amount of time before that door opens and the people come out. They might be going to just the next floor. You may not have several floors to be able to get this out. So an elevator pitch needs to be brief and concise, absolutely under 2 minutes, okay? No more than that. Actually, 2 minutes may be too long because you might have a person just going to the second floor. I mean, think, because that really, when we say elevator pitch, you may literally be in the elevator with somebody and that's the only time you have. I was in the elevator with Kwame Raoul when he was a state rep. He stepped in the elevator. I didn't know what floor he was getting out on. I bet I started talking about my organization as quickly as I could. Okay, we got out on the same floor. We got to walk to the same meeting. So I did get a chance to say it's more than I wanted to, but I didn't know. So I just started, and I knew that it was concise. I'd be able to get it out in enough time. And then we had longer to discuss. Okay. You want to tell them who you are, where you are, what you do, why you do what you do, and why you're worthy of the support to do what you do, okay? And you want to use strong, clear words, no jargon that they wouldn't understand, no acronyms that they have to think about, just say it quick, and if full name of your organization, everything. And we want you to create that, just given those aspects of what you need to think about when you are putting a pitch together, okay? Short, who you are, where you are, what you do, why you do it, and why you're worthy of support. And maybe some kind of, some impact statement. It could be stats, it could be a quick testimony of something one of your constituents said, okay?
Now I want you to, I think it's important because this is a little weird if you haven't done it before, but it's almost like if you were at a dinner party and you had to explain, well, what do you do and where you work? Why, and you say, well, I work here. This is what we do. It's such an important organization because, and that's essentially what it is. The simpler and stronger the language is, the easier it is for you to communicate the same thing throughout the organization from top to bottom. And when you have an organization like that, particularly if it's an organization doing organizing and advocacy kind of work, it's very empowering to have all of those people, anybody involved, be able to say these kinds of things. But in the fundraising context, it's that extra kind of asking. There's an intent there that I want you to give me money. Right. I want the government to do certain things, or I want this and that, but I want your support. So it is kind of being responsive to what a person would want to hear that would make them in that elevator kind of say, oh, or at that cocktail party, say, oh, maybe I want to give.
But we're going to send you into small groups again. You'll have 10 minutes. And I'll also throw the prompts into the chat once you're in small groups. Okay, here we go.
Okay, are we all back? Yes. So I want to throw it out there. How did that feel? Sitting there, thinking about your organization and trying to come up with this short, concise, brief pitch for everything you do. I just want to do a popcorn share. So why don't somebody from group 1, if you can report back. Anybody?
What group were we? I don't know what group I was.
Actually, and now that I'm thinking about it, were they rooms? Room 1, room 2, room 3? Did you guys notice? So it doesn't matter. Okay, so like Julia, your group, you
Right.
guys, who you are. Would you, somebody or one of you, or would you guys like to just report back on how it felt?
Okay, it felt like it reminded me, I'm an academic besides running the nonprofit. And this is something that we're asked to do a lot, like having this 2-sentence pitch of a whole book, right? What you're gonna do in a whole book. So the idea is familiar, but it requires a lot of preparation and practice, right? To be able to be so concise and to the point and to be compelling at the same time. But I think it's a great exercise. And it's good to do your own and also to listen to the others do their own, because you can, you can reflect upon what they do and then and use that to correct what you were doing. It's a great exercise.
Good, that's excellent. I'm glad that you said that. And the other thing too, like you said, it sounds like it's on the fly, right? Like you're just saying this stuff off the top of your head, but you've practiced it. You've actually thought about it, what you're saying. And as a staff, you guys and your board can come up with a general elevator pitch that, of course, everybody's going to find their comfortability with it. But it's a elevator pitch that everybody is saying across the organization. You don't have to worry too much about, am I going too far to the left, too far to the right? You all have a general understanding of your elevator pitch. I don't want to steal the thunder of the other group that I was in on. So I want to have Susan and her group talk about the elevator pitches that they heard and how easy it was or how hard. What did they find challenging or anything of that nature? And somebody besides Susan should talk. And I remember the group, so I'm going to jump in and call on somebody.
So I'll talk. I'll say for me it was hard. I think also for Rosie was also a little bit difficult. Susan is great. She has done the elevator speech so many times. So we actually use it as an example. One of the things that we did notice in our speech is that we do needed a few more things to add to make it a little bit better. But yeah, that was pretty much how it went.
Okay. Yeah, and I did get a chance to hear Susan's elevator pitch, and it's awesome. And definitely, you can tell this is something that she's done. She's practiced. She's said it over and over and over. And as she said, she has an elevator pitch that goes longer. She has an elevator pitch that is shorter. So, but I bet all of them are all in a general frame.
Emma, can we hear it? Now I'm interested in listening to it.
Oh, wow. Susan, do you mind? It really was awesome.
Thank you. I see if I can repeat it again. All right.
Whatever, just give whatever elevator pitch you would give.
Sure. Okay. Hi, my name is Susan Schulman. I'm the Executive Director of the North Suburban Legal Aid Clinic. The mission of the Legal Aid Clinic is to provide accessible, quality, pro bono legal services in the areas of immigration, domestic violence, and housing, so that those in need can have access to justice and live productive and secure lives. We serve people who are at 250% of the federal poverty guidelines, which works out to be approximately $66,250 for a family of 4. We serve people in North Suburban Cook County and Lake County. I always like to explain what legal services are. Legal services mean helping someone find a home, stay in their home, helping an immigrant become a U.S. citizen, and helping somebody escape an abusive relationship. Things that are going on right now in our 3 areas of practice. In immigration, there are more people there are more immigrants in the suburbs than there are in the city, and yet there's more funding for organizations in the city. So clearly there's more funding needed out here in the suburbs. In domestic violence, 1 in 3 women, it is estimated, will be a survivor of domestic violence. We've certainly seen that reflected in our exploding caseload. Our cases have completely exploded since the onset of COVID. Finally, in housing, we have the recent lifting of the eviction moratorium, which is causing a rapid rise in cases in our housing department. So with your support, we can tackle these issues and help to make access to justice a reality in our community.
Wow. Very good.
Thank
Really
you.
a bravo. It really is a bravo. And everybody
Very nice.
can have that same pitch. You just have to, I say, start with writing it down. You guys did these elevator pitches off the top of your heads, and you did really well for something that you're doing off the top of your head. But when a real elevator pitch has been written, has been rewritten, drafted, practiced, all kinds, so that you get to the point where you sound like Susan. And trust, you can get to that level. She has a lot of things in her, and actually that one was even probably a little bit shorter than the one that she gave previously. So the one group that was saying, add a stat, and you guys were like, oh, I'm like, no, really add a simple stat. You can just a stat of how many people you serve a year. That's a very simple stat, but it's a stat. It gives them an understanding, and it gives them a place to put a pin in about what you do. And if you have more time, then you have more things that you can say. And believe it or not, you know a lot more about your organization and the things you do than you probably give yourself credit for. So is there one more? Thank you, Susan, for that. That's awesome. Thank you.
And I would just say to the people who heard that pitch for the first time, ask yourself, why was it compelling? Break it down. Does Susan's organization seem, do you know what it does? Are you unclear or are you very clear? Do you know where it does it? Why it does it? And does it seem weighty? Does it seem credible based on the concise speaking that she just did? And if the answer is yes, then you say, okay, my goal is to create a statement that would be just as juicy, just as meaty.
She put a pin in some distinctions there about the disparate funding that goes to the city versus the suburbs, and the need is just the same in the suburbs. That's compelling. And then to say, and it's gone up since COVID. Oh my gosh. So there's some things that grabbed my attention. I want to know more. So it's very good. Very good. We had a third group, right? So you guys just jump in. How did you feel? Just thinking about what you just heard, how did you feel your pitch went? What do you think you can improve on? What do you, just anything. Jump in. Or I will call on somebody.
I will go.
Thank you.
So from the feedback that we got and basically what we heard, I think all three of us had a slightly different approach. I think it was a combination of putting emphasis on the emotional part, and then the second one was putting emphasis on some more details, and also talking about the community and the specifics of the population that we serve. And then the last one was a little more detail on the programs. So I think it was maybe what was mentioned towards the end was that maybe if we combine some elements of the three, that would be the ideal pitch, basically. And I believe that's the summary.
And bear in mind, just like Susan was saying, you can have a variation of pitches. Where, okay, I'm not going to say this, but it's going to be more geared towards program. Or this is going to be more geared towards, I don't know, emotion. But you make sure that you're hitting those points. You know what to lift up, And you know, in the moment, I think that's where you get into the on the fly is which pitch am I going to use? What if as I read the room, I read the person that I'm talking to, am I going to use more emotion? Am I going to use more stats? So you want to have a good understanding of all of it. And then you use your own flow, the way you finesse a person to talk to somebody. You bring yourself to that. Because remember, you're talking to another human being who, so it's not an object. You bring your own flow to it. So everybody's going to say it slightly differently. They may do it in a little different order, but you just want to make sure you're hitting those points. And you will know what you really need to say to that person to get at their listening. And the more you do it, the more comfortable you'll get with it. You and your board members. So, okay. Well, we're close to
I'm sorry.
yeah.
I just want to say, in addition, that last group, Susan reminded me of something. She used a COVID reference, which is a current event in the news kind of reference, tying her work to that. And in our group, there was somebody that mentioned the Afghanistan refugee crisis. Those are ways also of pulling someone in who might not be conversant or that, knowledgeable about the area in general that you're dealing with, and make it relevant to them in a way they can understand it. It's another little door. So I thought that was an excellent use of that when she did that.
Absolutely. So are there any other questions or comments about this exercise? What you think you will take with you? What you've learned? Anybody want to add anything? And if not, I know it's getting late in the afternoon. So I'm gonna
Emma, I think just very important. I learned that one mistake that I have is I want to say so much all the time, and Alison always tells me, be more concise. But actually, Susan said it like if she was reading from a brochure. So I think that's the best way to approach it. Just to put like a picture of your organization, make it compelling, but also very informational. And it all depends also, like Philip was saying, who you're presenting it to, it's like you're gonna touch the emotional, and like Diego was saying, it's gonna be a little more details to the where you are, like you said, if you're in a specific area, but I think just put it as a brochure. I think that's what I learned from Susan. So it was very, very enlightening. Thank you.
Netza, I'm the same way. I can talk forever. I really can. And I'm really passionate about what I do and all of that. So
that's the problem.
Yeah, but you know what? I had to understand that I need to hook them, and then I can talk. Once I get them in another place, we can talk for hours or whatever it is we're going to, to really get into the nitty gritty of what we do and really get that solicitation asked. So yes, to your point, those of us that can be very copious in what we want to say, it's good to think of it in those terms like a brochure, like bullet points. And and think of that order of the who, the what, the where, the when, the how, that kind of, and then once we really get them hooked, then you can go into all that other stuff.
Yeah, I laugh at myself because I always say, oh, by the way, and I sell tamales on Sundays.
I love that. Oh my gosh, if nothing else, you will get me coming to your tamales wherever you're selling it. I will be there getting it. And you know what? It's a good thing that you do that because you never know. That's another connection for somebody to connect with you and have further conversations. So I think it's great.
Yeah, I would just say, but never lose the passion. You know, and that's what this brother was very, I mean, you could feel it when he was talking. And you might forget details, but you won't forget that.
Mhm.
That kind of thing. That won't be faked. And there's an old saying, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Exactly.
And what I thought was so awesome about Susan's was she would manage to be very kind of technocratic and detailed, but you still got that she's a true believer and she means this.
Mhm.
And that's what's going to bring home the bacon.
You guys, this was a great, great training. I hope that you got something out of it, that you understand that connection with your board and how both of you working in tandem and together can create a great story for your organization that will help you move forward in your fundraising and resource development. And I'll put it off to Phil to take us home.
All right. So our evaluations are, we really appreciate if you could look at the link. Is the link been provided in the chat? We'd like you to kind of take the next few minutes to go through that. We really hope that you got a lot out of this workshop, and we wonder what you got out of this workshop, what things that we can change. Our intent was that you could make connections to your own organization and the work that you do and your colleagues are doing to the things that you're learning here. And I would also encourage you, outside of these written evaluations that you're doing now, is to encourage your colleagues to take part in these ongoing series of trainings about this, because I think you can see that there are things that you might not have thought about being directly connected to something you're doing, that, wow, it really is. And I think there are other people that could definitely benefit from having this kind of, training and exposure to aspects of the organization that they may not have been oriented into. So please fill out these the evaluations. They really help us craft the next sessions, and they really help us understand what kind of, do we need more of these kind of exercises? Are they helpful? What's helpful? And your feedback about things to follow up on and other things can be put in the later sessions.
Thank you, Jessica.
And we put the registration link for session number 4
Thank you, Susan.
in the chat. So please share that with your colleagues. That will be next Wednesday, and that'll be the 4th and final session in this series on board development and working with your boards.